right, let me just get the stream started and the recording going, and we will be all set. It is now 10 o'clock. All right, Steve, we are good to go.
All right, great. We'll go ahead and call the meeting to order. The meeting of the Technology Advisory Group is called to order. Craig, will you take a roll call, please?
Thank you, Chairman and members of the committee. Andy Sandoval. We have Robert Fisher for Brad Hardy. Robert, are you with us?
Yes, I am here.
Fantastic. Welcome. Brian Paul. Ed Winfield. Greg Tax. Jeff Sheets.
Here.
Jim Keane. So Jim. Okay. Joe Curtis. Kim Clark. Chris Dalbowen. Okay. Mark Wittenberg.
Present.
Matthew Ave. Mike Chickaroon.
Present.
Bill Osland. Welcome, Jim. Tassim Paridazadi.
Here.
Steve Holiday.
Here.
Tom Bacon.
Here.
Tracy Mills.
Here.
And Travis Cartwright.
Here.
And we do have a quorum.
Are there any other members participating who have not been called? Please remember to mute your microphone when you are not speaking. Call to the audience. Members of the public were asked to submit written comments related to this meeting on the MAG website within 1 hour of the posted start time for the meeting. They will also be able to send comments during the meeting using the chat function. Were there any comments or questions, Craig?
Yeah, no, they went up.
Thank you. Approval of November 19, 2020 meeting minutes. Could I have a motion to recommend approval of the November 19, 2020 meeting minutes?
Motion to approve.
Nope.
I think we'll give it to Travis. So there's a motion from Travis, and do I have a second?
I'll second it.
And a second from Tracy. Craig, could you take a roll call, please?
Absolutely. Andy Sandoval. Robert Fisher for Brad Hardig.
Approved.
Brian Paul. Ed Winfield. Greg Latax. Jeff Sheets.
Yes.
Jim Keane. Joseph Curtis. Kim Clark. Chris Dalbowen.
Present.
Mark Wittenberg. Mark, you still with us?
Yes. Sorry. Yes. Approved.
Matthew Ave. Mike Chickaroon.
Approved.
Bill Osland. Tassim Paridazadi.
Yes.
Steve Holiday.
Aye.
Tom Bacon.
Aye.
Tracy Mills.
Aye.
Travis Cartwright.
Aye.
And Andy, I saw you just joined us. This is for approval of the minutes.
Aye.
Thank you.
Thank you. Smart City Trends. Bill Finnerty of Gartner will provide an overview of smart city trends with a focus on data exchange, digital twins, and artificial intelligence.
Great, thank you. Let me share my screen out here for everyone. Seems to be taking a moment to do that. Let's see if. Now are you able to see that?
Yes, we are.
Okay, good, good. Well, thank you everyone for inviting me to speak to your group today. Wanted to take about the next 30 minutes and go through what do we see as some of the key trends that are impacting smart cities right now and where we're taking our research in this area. Over the past few years, we've identified an execution roadmap for smart cities that are getting started, right? And that involved collaboration, ecosystem development, and a digital government technology platform. But as we've been working with the most advanced cities in the world, when it comes to being smart cities at least, cities like Singapore and Helsinki and Utrecht, and some others, we've identified a common pattern for those cities that are moving beyond the early stages. Those are moving towards the intelligent urban ecosystem. The 3 steps still builds off the technical foundation of a digital government technology platform. Then these cities are implementing digital twins of the built world. And they're also driving innovation and economic development through a cross-industry data exchange. For today's conversation, we're going to take a look at digital twins, then data exchanges, and finally, focus on the core, the intelligence core of that digital government technology platform, and take a look at AI. Now, as I mentioned, intelligent urban ecosystems previously, this is a concept that Bettina Tratz-Ryan and myself have been working on in our last few cycles of research. And it's really about how we need to reconsider how smart cities work. They're not just cities in a jurisdictional sense, and certainly not in just the sense of IoT or one single data project. But instead, they're an ecosystem of public, private, and non-government organizations, of the different tiers of government, of multinational corporations and small businesses, and most importantly, of people, those that live, work, and play there. The intelligent urban ecosystems we have looked at globally have 6 common characteristics, guiding principles. And these guiding principles are, first of all, a focus on inclusion and digital equity to ensure that what you're doing with smart cities is not creating a greater digital divide. The second is collaboration with the community and the citizens, really focused on build with them, not for them. The third guiding principle is around service and ecosystem portfolio diversity. Smart cities that focus on one single area often struggle to be able to scale and to be able to take full advantage of the data that they generate. They all have a common focus on urban sustainability and infrastructure efficiency. They work on policy development, or policy and economic development, using smart cities, and most importantly, using the data that's generated from these projects. And that data and knowledge, it needs to be exchanged with partners. And it's all about making sure that the data is democratized throughout the city, that those with the most means and those with the least means have equal access and opportunity to leverage that data to generate new opportunity, new insights, and growth. So as we look at those, that's the filter through which we should look at the technology trends that we're going to discuss throughout the rest of this presentation. So let's take a look at the first one, digital twins. Now, digital twins is probably something that many of you are familiar with, particularly those that are working in public works or transportation areas, where you may be working with twins of a pump or twins of an engine or a bus or a vehicle of some sort. Right? But when we start to look at the types of digital twins that we're talking about, they're on a different scale. And we consider these twins of government. And they really represent 2 different types of twins, or 2 main categories, I should say. There are twins that are about the physical built world, right, and the systems that support those. And there are twins that are about government processes, right? And so as we look at these types of twins, we see that the other common challenge that people have when they're discussing these twins is confusion between a digital twin of the built world and GIS. Right? Now, I'm a huge fan of GIS. I've covered GIS for a number of years, and I started out working with GIS when I was a kid and following my dad around on weekends. He worked for the Department of Agriculture, and we would drive around Western New York looking at what farmers had planted so he could do his reports. And at that point, it was grease pens and Mylar maps. But by the time I got into college, they actually had some of their first computer systems put in GIS, and it sparked my interest. So I'm a huge fan of it. But I think there's a real risk when we consider GIS 3D models to be a digital twin. By themselves, they're not, because they don't have that real-time capability, right? And that is such an important component of a digital twin is the real-time understanding of that entity. We see that these digital twins that we're talking about do come in 3 forms. And so I want to talk about some of the, or each of these types of forms and an example of each of these. So the first type is a real-time insights tool. An example of this is from New South Wales and their spatial digital twin. And they created this in conjunction with Cicero 61 and the data group there. It started out, it does have a GIS 3D model as its foundation, right, as the underlying data set. But they've also started to focus on real-time sensor data, external data sources being included in, and they're using this for the understanding of the built world and the environment, being able to make better decisions based on, to start with, traffic and transportation. So they've modeled not only the streets and the traffic that's going on through this tool, they also have, of course, trains and micromobility and the other pieces put in play to be able to start to make better insights, not only about traffic patterns, and about actions they need to take to correct problems they're facing, but they're also using it to be able to inform individuals at a much more granular level about the challenges they may face in their commute or their travels and helping them to work around what they're doing. This twin provides a real-time capability, and it's going to continue to expand. They started with transportation, but they're looking at other areas, including water, electric, environmental impacts, and other areas to consider, including in this twin. Now, Australia is a leading country, by the way, when it comes to digital twins. They have a national digital twin effort. And just this morning, actually, I was reading about a new twin that's being developed in Australia for Australian Post, where they're creating a twin of their distribution network, of the delivery capabilities for their postal service. So they definitely have a lot of push in this area. The second type of twin is about command and control, and being able to use the twin to be able to make either enhanced or automated decisions, right? And so as we look at this type of twin, Helsinki's flood management capabilities, which I'm going to try to pronounce the name, and I apologize if anyone is better at Swedish than I am and I butcher this, but Kalasatama is the name of the digital twin that they've created, right? And the Kira Digital, it's part of the Kira Digital Initiative. This twin is focused on a section of the city that is particularly prone to flooding. They've created a digital twin of this area to begin with that maps not only the built environment and the current water levels, but then they started to put sensors in place to be able to understand where water levels rise. They were able to map the hydrology. They brought in external data related to rainwater. And they started to create this twin. And then they started to build it into other areas too. So they started to consider things like solar and the impact of solar. They started to look at groundswells and other ways of trying to divert water to be able to create better situations. And ultimately, what they're pushing towards in this case is being able to automate a number of these processes using data from the twin to be able to create a much more fluid response that's proactive or even predictive in the way that the city handles these solutions. A neat part of this, though, and it influences the second part of our conversation around data exchanges, is that they've now started to connect the digital twin into their data exchange, where they're exposing the APIs and the data from the twin for private sector to be able to use, to leverage that data and be able to use it to create new economic growth. Third type of twin is around long-term scenario planning, right? Things like disaster planning and digital twins of humans in some cases. Singapore is working on a number of digital twins, and they have their primary program is called Virtual Singapore. And they've created a number of different twins, one of parks, one for emergency management. They have one of the port, a number of the different twins. But one of their big goals is to consider the impact of long-term development on the physical world that they are managing. And so they've started to really look at modeling future growth. So if they're going to build in new apartment buildings or new high rises, they're going to put in new housing development, going to change road patterns. What's that going to do to impact the quality of life that Singaporeans experience as they're going about their daily activities? A really important piece of this is their continuous innovation and the continuous push in this area. Singapore has a national program that invests 1% of GDP into innovation every year. And a portion of that goes into government and is being used by GovTech as it starts to push this virtual twin programs moving forward. If you really want to take a look at a really interesting twin, if you get a chance to look at the virtual Singapore efforts around the parks, most of us are familiar with the image of Singapore and the parks with the giant lighted trees and the sky walkway that goes between them. That park actually has a digital twin of it that they've used, and they've actually automated a number of capabilities there too, to include autonomous grass maintenance, bush trimming, and trees as well. So then let's take a look at the second area here, which is data exchanges and marketplaces. Now, most of you are familiar with open data and are doing open data at this point. And open data is definitely a foundation, but it's really focused on the idea of transparency. I mean, the open data movement starts from that spot. But we hear over and over again, right, that the data is the new oil, or as I've coined it in previous presentations, it's really a new soil, because it's not a consumable resource that gets used up, but in that process, there's an opportunity for economic development. And we see that there are a number of open data platforms, the US federal government's open data platform is an example, that have tracked some of the economic impact that's been created based on the efforts that they've put forward. But now we see that cities are driving further with this, right? That they're looking at innovation and economic growth and setting up platforms that elevate open data to a new tier. They're not just about being able to take open data sets and expose them. There are other tools that are included. Common tools include things like API management and visualization. They engage multiple parties in these platforms to be able to create a data exchange. Some of the data sets remain open or free, and some of them are accessed for a fee. Different parties are able to put data in. They're able to take data from various participants, enhance that data, and be able to turn around and sell it on the marketplace. Maintains the open data principles, because of course those original data sets that were generated by government are available as open data sets, but the enhanced data sets are where they're able to generate revenue. So let's take a look at a couple of examples of this. The first one is from the northern UK, and this is the Data Mill North. Data Mill North started out as the open data platform for Leeds. Right? And from there, they realized there was an opportunity, and they wanted to capitalize on their traditional economic drivers in the area. And so they focused on branding this solution as it would relate to the people that work and live in those cities. And so they came up with the idea that this was going to be a mill, and they created the Data Mill. Really, the idea here is that they wanted to use open data from the council and from other external organizations to drive collaboration, innovation, and engagement. It becomes their focus. To date, they have over 700 data sets that they've published from 60 different publishers. And yes, many of those are government, right? So Leeds and many of the surrounding cities and communities publish data sets. There are some environmental data that's been published there, but there's also a number of industries that have started to put, and academics that have started to put data sets and enhanced data sets out. There's a example from the project where some professors that have been working on it's actually an IoT project that's experimental around measuring, I believe it's pollutants within the water of some of the bogs. They've actually exposed the data set as an example. There's two guys that are in the brewing industry that have created a number of data sets related to brewing in the area and be able to expose them. So they've really done this to be able to drive, the digital economy in the North. And some of the challenges they face, they continue to face a challenge around talent, right? They're competing for talent just like everybody else is. And so they know that is an area they continue to struggle with. They have put in some efforts around individual governments working to develop not only internally, but externally data literacy capabilities. They've also faced some challenges around infrastructure. And so they've moved this into a SaaS or a cloud-based solution to be able to address some of those needs. All of this, by the way, was funded from seed money from Leeds Council, that original open data platform, and some of the money that was going towards that was used. And then the other main funding source has been the UK Cabinet Office's Data Fund, which is a national grants program towards using data to drive economic development and growth of efficiencies and effectiveness within government. Their goal, though, is that the data mill will become self-sufficient down the road, and that through the sale of enhanced data sets on the platform, access to APIs, they're bringing API capability in. That's one of the next things they're working on. They are looking at the idea of having a continuous revenue stream that allows them to be able to continue to fund the solution. And another example of this is from Abu Dhabi in the UAE. And they have developed a unified data platform specifically around culture and tourism. And yes, this did start out from a government initiative, right, within the Department of Culture and Tourism, where they have hundreds of different data sets that they can use to understand the hospitality industry and tourism in their area. But they knew that there was a lot of inefficiencies in both gathering that data and, more importantly, in using that data. They really wanted to be able to compete, of course, highly competitive tourism environment in the UAE, and they really wanted to be able to compete with a number of their Gulf Coast, the Gulf countries, and for tourism. And so they pushed this idea that this was going to be a partnership between them and the hospitality industry. They created a data platform using an agile approach to be able to implement this. It was the first time using agile in their organization. They did find some challenges with that as they brought these teams together. They found that many in the industry side were a little more advanced than some of those on the government side, and so there was some skills gap that had to be addressed. But with that, what they've done is they've started to create two important pieces. Number one is self-service reporting. So there's automatic data submission from a number of the companies and a number of the different partners, government and private sector, to contribute into the platform. But there's also self-service reporting for a number of those partners and internal to the department, something that they previously had to wait for others to generate reports. But they've also created this 360-degree view of the tourists, and they share this across the industry and across the various partners so that they can work on creating a more personalized experience for each individual traveler, creating a better situation, being more attractive, being able to create better opportunities for them to grow this particular industry. Now, the funding for this is a combination of public and private sector, a significant portion of it coming from the Emirates and being used to drive the original development and the underpinning platform here. Some of the enhancements from the private sector have been specifically around this 360-degree view of the tourist and a few others, but that's really when they've primarily been focused. So then let's take a look at the third area that we wanted to discuss briefly here, and that is artificial intelligence. Now, the first thing I wanted to do was share some data with you from our CIO survey. Now, in our CIO survey, we asked government CIOs and respondents, what is their enterprise's plans as it relates to digital technologies and trends, and specifically, one of those trends was the adoption of AI. This is the local government cut from that survey, which is a total of 63 respondents, specifically in local government. It is a global survey, although there is the data heavily leans towards North America, just in reviewing the participants in the survey. With that, what we really see is that there is a real push around the use of AI, right? 60%, or actually just over 60% of governments or respondents said that their government is either deployed or will deploy AI. They have it in active plans over the next 24 months. Right? And so this survey took place in October of last year. So there's really a strong push. There's another chunk that feels that they're 2 to 3 years away. But one of the more interesting pieces is it's a very small percentage, this 6%, that have no interest. Right? This is not true. Many of the other trends we look at, things like digital twin, we see a much higher percentage of no interest. So the fact that there is over 90% are within that 3-year range, we think that's a really significant indicator that we're going to see some explosive growth. And this is being driven by things that we see, things like offering AI as a service, right? Which we see companies like Airbus and Corti and Google doing for governments already. We'll look at some examples around that. So as we start to consider how do we put AI into use, one of the key areas that we think there's an opportunity is really around citizen experience, right? And being able to drive the value of the service usually delivered to citizens through making them better experiences, often proactive experiences, and predictive experiences. So when we start to look at the approach to this, we see that there's a triangle of 3 key steps that need to happen, and they feed into each other, right? And so the first thing is that we can use AI to sense what's going on, right? Things like finding meaning, sentiment analysis, right? And we see this very common in citizen experience capabilities, where listening into phone calls, doing sentiment analysis on social media and other data to be able to understand the experience that individuals are having and use that to be able to drive improvements. The second area that we see is that you should use AI to think, right? To predict outcomes, find relationships, create associations, right? We see a number of governments that are using AI to be able to do proactive and predictive outcomes. There's an example that I have in my sets that looks at some work that Western Australia, I believe it is. Yeah, I believe that's what the province is, or the state is. Whoops. That is using AI to be able to do predictive analysis on social media posts and tax filings to be able to reduce their tax burden, right? Those that default. And so they use it to be able to understand which profiles people fall into and be able to create plans for them that are predictive. We see experiences around case management starting to adapt this type of thinking approach to AI to be able to be more predictive. And then the final area, or the final piece of this, is the do, right? So how can you use AI to be able to do and improve the citizen experience in your outcomes? These are things like optimize processes, take informed actions, right? Automated assistive actions, right? And so we see a number of governments using next best step approaches, using artificial intelligence. We see them using AI and the data analysis to be able to improve the way that they deliver services. We see this in transportation. We see a big project that TransLink in the Vancouver area did with Microsoft around using AI to do predictive modeling of their arrival times and departure times for buses to be able to improve the system, as an example. So all of this, though, requires that as you do this, you learn from each of these steps, right? And get smarter with every customer interaction, with every step that you take, and that it's constantly feeding back into the process. We see one of the ways that governments struggle with AI at this point is when it tends to be a one-off project and they don't use it to continue to feed. Okay, so let's take a look at a couple of examples. One of those is StormSense, and this is a project out of the Hampton Roads area of Virginia, so Virginia Beach, Chesapeake, in that area. And it's a project that was developed in conjunction with William & Mary College, funded through grants from the Virginia Center of Innovation Technology, NIST, and Amazon, or AWS. Are some of the primary funding sources. But what they wanted to look at was tidal surge. And really, they wanted to look at it from two key areas. To begin with, they wanted to look at it from a transportation perspective and how that would impact emergency management. And the other direction was from a risk perspective and understanding how to use that modeling to be able to avoid future risk. So they've developed some new sensors along with a professor at William & Mary to be able, there are low cost sensors. Previously, sensors cost over $4,000 to put in place when they were using the National Weather Service sensors. They've now got sensors that are down under $300, and so they can deploy them much more efficiently than they were able to before. But now we see that they've adopted AI into this, and they've developed a machine learning algorithm to be able to look at water levels and develop a water level map that is predictive. The map is now able to be updated within a 6-minute time frame. So each time they get a new set of data, they're able to provide a 6-minute predictive model. They're using this not only to be able to inform like automated road closures, but members of the community can use natural language processing through Alexa, obviously Amazon's influence here, right? To be able to get updates on flood, to understand if they need to be considering evacuating their homes or taking other mitigative steps. But we also see where like insurance companies are starting to talk to them and considering, and which could be a possible new revenue stream for the project, where they're looking at being able to use this information to be able to say to people, by the way, you just parked your car in a spot that we think based on this model will flood in the next 4 hours. Move your car, right? If you don't, then it's your problem. And so there's a advantage from the insurance companies in that process, not only better customer service, but of course, risk mitigation on their part and potential cost savings. Another example is Harris County, Texas. And this is the Houston area, of course. And they've developed a multilingual emergency response platform, really. It started out with just text, now it's text and voice. But the idea here was to be able to deal with the fact that they have over 26 different languages that call in regularly. And I'm sure this is something that Maricopa County can relate to in a number of their efforts as well. But in that challenge that they faced, the old process existed, and they would, someone would either call in or message in, and they would have to get somebody to start translating. Right, and that would often take up to 2 to 3 minutes to be able to get that person connected in and get the process going. With help from Agent 911 and some use of Google, some of Google's natural language processing tools, they were able to first start out with automatic translation of text messages. Now they've started to migrate this towards voice. They've been able to reduce their response time. They've been able to reduce the response time to emergencies where someone calls in is not the primary language of the call taker by over 2 minutes, which obviously if you're somebody having a heart attack or somebody in a trauma situation, every second counts, and these are some pretty significant ways to be, or pretty significant gains and lives being saved. We see lots of other examples. Companies like Cordy that's working with Seattle to be able to use artificial intelligence to be able to do diagnosis of 911 calls for cardiac arrest and COVID and stroke and other things that they're working on. We see lots of examples of cities that are using predictive modeling within weather to be able to do wind damage assessments. We see cities using predictive or using modeling and artificial intelligence machine learning to be able to do solar analysis and other steps of that nature. So the recommendations coming out of this, taking these approaches and considering where do they fall into your overall plans, some steps you can take. First of all, use scenario planning to create a long-term vision for your smart city efforts of your organization and of the region. And if you aren't doing scenario planning today or you're not familiar with it, happy to have a conversation with you afterwards to discuss that in detail. We've got a number of pieces of research, myself and Rick Howard and John Koss and others can definitely have that conversation with you. Second of all, establish that digital government technology platform that's going to be able to easily onboard and offboard solutions and drive innovation. Doesn't matter whether you're at the beginning and early steps to smart cities or you're working towards being one of the more advanced, we see it as an important underlying piece. Third thing, develop ecosystem maps, right? We want to move, we see the need to move, right, towards this broader ecosystem view of smart cities, right? These maps are a great way to start to understand who those potential partners are, where data can be shared between those, start to explore opportunities that can maybe be leveraged through a data marketplace and be able to add economic value and growth. By the way, I forgot to mention as we went through that section, if you want to look at an example of a data marketplace here in the US, look at North Florida. This Smart North Florida has developed a data marketplace around Jacksonville. It's quite interesting to look at. The fourth one, work with your program areas to really consider how AI is going to fit in and really consider the ethics piece of this. Right? We've seen, of course, and all of you have read the challenges that a number of governments have faced around things like facial recognition. We see a lot of similar risks come as AI is being deployed. The more you can engage the community up front, understand what their concerns are, be able to deal with ethicists to be able to make sure that the way that governments are using AI can be explained and communicated easily, that it's following the best practices and meeting the community needs. We really think it's an important step so that we don't end up in the same situation where we deploy stuff and we have to keep taking it back and deploy and take back. And finally, really look at the concept of digital twins, create a center of excellence around these concepts for implementation and expansion. One thing we know about digital twins, few organizations that we've talked to build a digital twin, right? They build a digital twin and then somebody else says, oh, and I could use that to do this, and I could use it to do that, and I could use it to do the next thing, right? And there's almost an exponential growth we see in many organizations. It's an important area to be focused on, and having a center of excellence to make sure that everybody's on the same page can be quite helpful in their development. So with that, let me pause there and open up to questions.
Thank you, Bill. Are there any questions from MAG membership? No questions? All right, Bill, thank you for your time this morning. We really appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you, Stephen. Of course, everybody that's a client or is engaged with Gartner, working through Jeremy or Megan or your other representatives and team members, happy to set up follow-up conversations, myself or any of my colleagues. Have a good rest of your day, everyone. Stay safe. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you. Okay, Regional Wireless Cooperative Overview. John Imeg of the Regional Wireless Cooperative will provide an overview of the RWC.
Okay, Mr. Chair, thank you, members of the TAG. Thanks for having me back. It's good to be back and see everybody, albeit virtually. I'm going to share my screen. Actually, I can't share my screen. Craig, can you allow me to share my screen here? There we go. Perfect. Okay. Can everybody see the presentation on here?
Yes.
Okay. So forgive me if a lot of you know this information already, but I'm going to run through this quickly. And I'm glad to answer questions at any time. So just jump in and hit me with a question. So the genesis of the RWC really happened back in the early 1990s when the city of Phoenix was looking to replace their legacy VHF system with a digital trunk radio system. So in 2001, Phoenix residents approved the bond funding, went live in 2005 as an 800 megahertz trunk radio system called PERWIN, Phoenix Regional Wireless Network. And it was originally envisioned to be sort of a pay-to-play, subscription-based service that Phoenix would offer up to other entities. It didn't really take, didn't really get the draw that they wanted to. So through the late 2000s, 2007, 2008, there were a lot of discussions that went on, driven a lot by Chief Jack Harris at the time from the Phoenix Police. And in 2009, it really morphed into what is now the RWC, the Regional Wireless Network, or Regional Wireless Cooperative Network. The RWC now oversees the administration, the operation, the management, the maintenance, operations, and growth of the communications network. So what is the RWC? Well, it's a cooperative body formed under a number of intergovernmental agreements between all of its members and the RWC through the city of Phoenix as the administrative manager. It's open to local, state, federal, tribal entities, so any government entity. It is governed by a board of directors, which is made up of one representative from each member. The administrative manager is the city of Phoenix. So what the city of Phoenix is reimbursed by the cooperative for the administration and the operation of the system, the financial management, and the staffing. So the staff and I are all employees of the city of Phoenix, but we answer to the board of directors and we are accountable to the board of directors. The city of Phoenix is also identified as the network manager for the system. They operate the wireless network. And there are two maintenance managers. The city of Phoenix maintains almost the entirety of the system, but the city of Scottsdale maintains its simulcast subsystem, which we call C, on the system. So they maintain their portion of the network, although it's tied in with the rest of the system. The structure, again, is made up of the board of directors as the governing body of the system. I answer directly to the board. There is an executive committee, which is made up of representatives, a representative from law enforcement, from fire, from general government, and from technology, who works alongside me to look at major issues, vet the agenda before it goes to the board, that sort of thing. That's what the executive committee's role is. I have 3 staff members who work for me, an accountant, a management assistant, and an administrative aide. And then we have a number of working groups, some of which you are members of, some of your people are members of, including operations working group, the conventional working group, which deals with our VHF network, fire code, and then the policy working group, which deals with policies and procedures of the cooperative. The system itself covers well over 4,000 square miles of coverage, perhaps several thousand more than that. It's hard to say, because we haven't really mapped it out to know what the exact coverage is, but it's at least 4,000 square miles. We cover over 3.3 million residents through our member agencies. We currently have 20 members, 15 cities and towns, 3 fire districts, 1 higher education institution, and 1 federal agency that we brought on at the end of our first federal agency we brought on at the end of last year, end of 2020. We have 2 conditional participants. I'll explain in a little bit what those are. 2 associates, and then we have 44 interoperability participants. And again, I'll get into that in just a minute to explain what all of those types of participants are. So currently, as of now, we have 20 members, which is made up of the majority of the cities and towns in the Phoenix metro area, The exceptions would be those member agencies made up of the really East Valley cities and towns who are part of our companion system, which is called the TRWC, or the Topaz Network, which is most notably the city of Mesa, town of Gilbert, city of Apache Junction, Superstition Fire, that sort of thing. They make up the TRWC system. But the RWC is pretty much everybody else. So we go from Buckeye in the far West Valley to city of Maricopa down in Pinal County to the Daisy Mountain Fire District in the north. So really a lot of agencies. You'll notice in the middle there, the Federal Reserve Bank of San Francisco. They're our first federal partner, our first federal member. They joined us in November, and we're going to be looking at getting them live on the system here in the first quarter of this calendar year. So, the next couple of months we'll be bringing the Federal Reserve up. We're just working through the technical issues there. So any questions up till now, where we come from, or I'm happy to continue. Okay, not hearing any. So this is kind of a map that shows, the membership of the RWC. You'll notice sort of those East Valley agencies, or East Valley cities, Mesa and so forth. They're part of the other system again, as I had mentioned. But really geographically, we go from the city of Maricopa in the far south, clear up to the north end of the Daisy Mountain Fire District, which is in Black Canyon City. And then again, out to the city of Buckeye. We're currently building a site. I don't know if you can see my cursor here. We're building a site here at Burnt Mountain, which is at 411th Avenue and I-10. So as soon as that site's done, then we'll be bringing on the Buckeye Valley Fire District and the Harquahala Fire District. So we're going to be going far, far out west along I-10 once that's done. So we cover a huge geographic footprint with the system. So the system is based around what Motorola calls their Astro 25 system. It's a digital trunk radio system. We entirely operate within the 700 megahertz band. We moved everything off of 800 a few years ago. We have 53 sites on the system. We have 975 talk groups or channels, to simplify it a little bit. Our member agencies collectively have over 200 dispatch consoles. The trunk system serves law enforcement, serves fire for what we call non-hazard zones. So EMS calls, that sort of thing, operate on the trunk system. And then general government, which would be your public works and utilities and parks and rec departments, that sort of thing. They all use the trunk's radio system. We are also responsible for what we call the conventional system, which is VHF system. This is actually exclusively used by fire departments. We have 71 sites on the VHF system. 15 channels are used on it. And these are, again, used exclusively by fire departments for hazard zone communications. So anytime they have to don their PPEs, fires, hazardous materials incidents, anything that they need to switch over to the VHF, it's a VHF simplex system. That's what this is. So they have dual band radios. They're capable of operating on either the trunk system or the VHF system. Our associate members are currently Maricopa Ambulance and AMR Ambulance, or the remaining subsidiaries of AMR, which would be Lifeline, PMT, Rural Metro. Associates are allowed to use the system while they are under contract to one of our members. So the city of Glendale, for instance, contracts with Maricopa Ambulance for its transport services. So we bill Maricopa for their radios that are on the system. Other members of ours use AMR under contract. So we bill AMR for their number of radios that they have on the system. So those are what are called associate members. They're not government entities, but they are under contract to government entities. So they are allowed to be associates under the cooperative governance. Conditional participants are those participants who are sort of in that hinterland of not quite ready to be a member yet, but more than more than others. So that's, as I mentioned a minute ago, the Buckeye Valley Fire District and the Harquahala Fire District. They're using the system for VHF only right now because that's the coverage they have out in their respective districts. We bill them for their use of the VHF. Once the Burnt Mountain site is commissioned later this year, we expect they will become full members, or they will apply for full membership, and they will then be billed for their use of not only the VHF system, but the Trump system as well. Interoperability participants are government and quasi-government agencies that are allowed to use the system on in cooperation with our members. So if you have a tactical situation such as a pursuit or an active shooter situation where you've got multiple agencies coming together who interoperate on the system, they're allowed to come onto the RWC system and use our interoperability channels. We actually have 5 interoperability decks, we call them. They're allowed to come on and communicate with our members for the purposes of handling that situation. We also use it extensively for pre-planned situations, such as when you have elected officials, federal elected officials come to town, that sort of thing, or large events. We have a system where we allow them to reserve our members reserve the interoperability, and then we give the information out to any of these interoperability participants. I think we have 44 of them right now. So that's really what they're for. They're not allowed to use it for their day-to-day operations, but if they need to use it to communicate with our member agencies, that ability is there, and that is through formal agreements with them. We have 2 potential future members that we're working with right now: the Department of Veterans Affairs, the VA, for their hospital and clinic facilities. They have a strong need for a new communications solution. They're working right now to get through some of their federal hurdles that they have with the procurement. So they're really looking to how we dealt with the Federal Reserve to get that done. And then right now we're working with the town of Wickenburg. They have a strong need for a new communication solution. Right now our coverage out there is hit and miss just because of the physical distance from the rest of the valley that Wickenburg is. But they're looking at some funding to get 1 or 2 new sites built to RWC specifications, at which time they would then become or apply to become members of the RWC. So we're working with Wickenburg and the VA right now. So our funding for the RWC is funded through annual fees, which pays for the administration, the operations, the maintenance, replacement of the infrastructure, and upgrades. So that's through the subscriber fees. And then any special assessments that might be needed, which is more of a one-time funding mechanism that we use. So for FY21, we have almost 19,000 subscriber units, 19,000 radios on the system. And these are through our member agencies only. So what we do is we take our total O&M and staffing cost annually, then what we call the SUA2, which is Motorola's system upgrade program. You guys are all technology people, we've got to keep it updated. So we pay for the SUA2. For this year, we're finishing out the TDMA conversion, which is the technology conversion where it's essentially narrow banding the remainder of our frequencies using the TDMA technology. And phase D is phase 2D actually is our final phase of that. So we have a total budget of $11.5 million for this fiscal year. And essentially what we do is we divide it by the number of subscribers, which comes out to currently $32.78 a month. And then we divide that, or we multiply that by the number of subscribers in use in each agency. So it's purely equality based. Everybody who is a member gets an equal voice and equal representation in the cooperative, and then they pay their share by the number of subscribers that they have. So we're at $32.78 a month per radio right now. And then on the VHF side, we have almost 3,700 VHF radios on the system. Again, those are the fire radios. Those are billed at a different rate. We bill those at $11.39 a month because the VHF network, we don't have any maintenance costs on the VHF that we pay to Motorola like we do on the trunk system. The VHF system is entirely managed and maintained by the city of Phoenix, and therein our cost is quite a bit lower on that because we just have those internal costs. So $32.78, $11.39 for the two systems is how our funding is managed across the system. Some of our performance stats every year, the last year we measured it, we had over 28 million push to talks. So somebody pushed a button and said something on one of those radios 28 million times last year, which averages just under 74,000 a day. So that's a lot of people talking on the system, and it's a lot of use. A busy is when they get what we call a bonk. They push to talk button, and it gives them just a noise that says, "I'm busy right now." Well, if they push it again right away, they're going to get what we call a talk permit tone, which is go ahead and talk. And so busies per year average 0.4 a day, so less than one a day. So the system is not, it's just saying the system is not overtaxed in any way. When somebody pushes the button, when an officer pushes the button or a public works person, they're in the vast majority of the time, they're going to get a permit tone and they're going to be able to talk on it. Emergency calls are defined as that time when somebody hits the emergency button on the top of their radio. The orange button on the top of their portables, which is their lifeline for help. We get about 3,500 of those a year, which equates to just under 10 a day. But the majority of those are fingers hitting those buttons by mistake. You know, it just happens. Button's easy to get to. So we do track those. So system availability, we track constantly. And currently we're at 3 nines and a little bit extra. So we're at 99.95%, which is a highly desirable number. And, you know, we designed the system to be at 3 nines, and that's what we're operating at. We're very close to 4 nines. We'll get there, but the majority of the system downtime is planned, and that's part of this number. So this is not only unplanned downtime, which we have, knock on wood here, which we have very little of, very little unplanned downtime. And if it is, it's one site, you know, or it's a little section of a zone or something. The system is designed in such a way that we've got multiple layers of redundancy, not only on our talk groups, not only on our sites, but we've got an entirely secondary overlay system that are comprised of mountaintop sites that's completely separate from our valley floor sites that operate on the system. We've got dual microwave paths to each site, or at least one microwave and one fiber path. We've got a few sites that are still left on leased lines, T1s. Those are going to get retired here in the next couple of years. We have to get rid of any of the leased lines. We've got to go entirely with either microwave or a hybrid of microwave and fiber if it's available. Our preference is to go with licensed microwave. So as of 2019, I didn't update this with the 2020 numbers. I should have gotten them, but total subscribers on the system is 41,000, just short of 41,000. That's the 19,000 member subscribers, and then the remainder of those are on our interop partners. So a lot of radio IDs that we have to manage on the system. But again, it's highly reliable, highly robust. I'm proud to have been involved with this since 2008. And, you know, certainly in my most recent role for the last 2 years. So that is where we are with the RWC, and that's kind of the quick and dirty, what is the RWC? And I am more than happy to answer questions from any of you.
Does anyone have any questions?
Mr. Chair, if I will, this is Ryan Gish.
Hi, Ryan. Oh, sorry. Go
Hey,
ahead.
John, I just wanted to just kind of say thanks for your help with the RWC. I've previously worked with John Sater.
Yeah.
Over there, and just trying to get some extra, I guess, connections with the RCN in areas that we couldn't normally reach with fiber. So I just kind of wanted to say thank you for your guys' efforts in that. And I think we're also working with John, but looking at other ways that we can kind of create some of joint connections. So either you guys could hop off of some of the fiber connections we have or off of those direct fiber links, or also be using your guys' connections. So I just want to say thank you for your help and efforts towards that with the RCN.
Excellent, Ryan. Thank you. Yeah, it's a great partnership. We do have some challenges in certain places where we, especially now that we're trying to get off of T1 connections and get onto fiber or microwave. But John Sater is the lead technology specialist on our backhaul. So he is the microwave specialist at the Phoenix end of this. So thank you.
You bet.
Any other questions?
Okay.
All right.
Mr.
Thank
Chair,
you.
members of the TAG, thank you very much. It's good to see everybody again, and thanks for having me.
Thank you. Okay, this item was on the agenda for information and discussion only. Moving on to number 6, agency project update. Committee members can discuss current agency projects that may be of a regional interest to the committee. This item's on the agenda for information and discussion only. Do we have any project updates?
This is Robert Fisher with Scottsdale. I can inform you about 3 software projects we're working on currently.
Go ahead.
The first is we just finished replacing our learning management system. Internally, we call it Scottsdale University, with a product from Meridian. And we do have some internally built, training programs, but a lot of the information that's in that system will be fed from Open Sesame. We were running on the old platform for over 10 years, so it's a big change for us now. We've moved to this SaaS model now. We also have RFP demos right now for 2 large systems in our organization. The first is a document management system, and then the second is our content management system that houses our scottsdaleaz.gov site, library site, and economic development site. So we don't have the final evaluations done on those yet, but we are in the process of looking at alternative solutions for the future for those.
Thank you, Robert. Are there any other project updates?
This is Mark Wittenberg, City of Tempe. I have a question for Robert on your document management solution. You said you're out to RFP. Are you in the review phase for that one as well?
Yes, they just finished the demos, I think, for the top 3 or 4 selected vendors last week. So they're in the final evaluation stage of those demos.
Great, thank you. We just found out Sire is end of support, so we're going to be in the same boat.
Yeah, we should have some more information on that within the next few months as we work through that process.
Great, thank you.
Any other comments or questions on projects? Okay, none heard. Moving on. Requests for future agenda items. Are there any requests by membership for an item on a future agenda? Okay, no requests, but I would assume that you could forward them to Craig if anything comes up between now and the next meeting. Okay, Craig, were there any tasks assigned during this meeting?
No, there will not. I'll continue to work on the agenda for the March meeting.
Okay, thank you. The next meeting of MagTag is scheduled for Thursday, March 18th, 2021 at 10 a.m. If I could get a motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn.
Motion by Travis and a second.
Second, Mark.
Second from Mark. The meeting is now adjourned. Thank you, everybody, for your time this morning, and we'll see you at the next meeting.
Thanks.
Appreciate it. Thanks.
Thanks all.
Thanks, everyone.